What would you do if your own daughter dragged you into court and tried to erase you from your own legacy? That isn't a headline from some tabloid scandal. That is my life. My name is Edward Sterling. I am 62 years old, and I built Sterling Tech with my bare hands over 3 decades. But today, I stand at the edge of a nightmare I never imagined, not a hostile takeover by a rival company, not an economic collapse, but a betrayal that cut deeper than any boardroom war. This is the shocking truth of family betrayal, the kind of courtroom drama that destroys bloodlines and leaves scars no judge can heal. It began on a quiet evening when I was driving to my daughter Clara's home for dinner. My phone buzzed. It was Jonathan Pierce, my attorney of 30 years. His message was short, chilling. Call me immediately. It's about Clara. My first thought was an accident. My second, an illness. But nothing prepared me for the words I heard when I dialed back. Clara has filed a petition. She wants the court to declare you incompetent to run Sterling Tech. She claims you've lost your mental stability since Margaret's death. The world went silent. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles burned white. How do you process the idea that your own child is ready to stand in front of strangers and prove you unfit? Insane. Broken Margaret, my wife, the love of my life, had died 5 years earlier. Her loss carved a hole in me that never fully healed. But I kept building, kept working, kept moving forward because that's what leaders do. And now my grief had been weaponized, twisted into evidence against me by the very person I once groomed to carry on my work, from the 49th floor of my office. Seattle had always been a vision of triumph. Tonight, the rain streaking down the windows felt like tears I couldn't shed. Clara wasn't just filing a lawsuit. She was gathering allies, shareholders lured by promises of bigger dividends, by dreams of automation, by fantasies of cutting unnecessary staff. She had built a coalition, not of family, not of loyalty, but of greed. And at the center of it all was my daughter, the little girl I once carried on my shoulders, now sharpening her knife against me. This is not just business. This is not just grief. This is war inside the walls of a family. In 1 week, a courtroom will decide if I am still the man I know I am, or if my daughter's story of decline, instability, and weakness will strip me of everything. 1 week to prepare, 1 week to fight, 1 week to remind her and the world that I am not finished yet. And so I ask you to stay with me, to witness this revenge story unfold. Because betrayal may break a heart, but it can also awaken a fire, and Clara is about to learn where I truly stand. I always believed that one day Clara would inherit Sterling Tech, not through bloodless documents or courtroom decrees, but through trust. I pictured us walking into shareholder meetings side by side, her voice steady as she learned to carry the weight of leadership, my hand eventually passing the torch without fear. But those dreams turned to ash the moment Jonathan Pierce laid the evidence before me. My daughter hadn't been preparing to inherit. She had been preparing to overthrow. Jonathan slid the folder across my desk with the kind of hesitation that told me he wished he didn't have to. Inside were emails, projections, meeting notes, months of secret maneuvering. Clara had been whispering in boardrooms, sliding promises across polished tables, speaking the language of greed fluently enough to seduce men and women I once trusted as allies. Robert Ellison had been promised a 15% dividend increase. Linda Crawford was shown sleek reports forecasting massive savings through automation. Younger investors, restless for faster growth, were dazzled with her slides about AI systems and modernization strategies. She had crafted a story that painted me as obsolete, clinging to outdated ideals, while she stood as the visionary who would drag Sterling Tech into the future. But that future was written in blood layoffs, cultural collapse, a company gutted of its soul in exchange for numbers on a quarterly report. She wasn't just betraying me. She was betraying the very people who had built this company brick by brick beside me. I stared at the names on Jonathan's list, names I had trusted for decades. Ellison, Crawford, and others whose signatures once celebrated our anniversaries, who shook my hand at every record-breaking quarter, who wrote me condolences when Margaret died. 30 years of loyalty, 30 years of trust, undone by 6 months of Clara's whispers. That was the knife twisting deepest, not just that my daughter had turned against me, but that she had convinced my friends to join her. What cut me even deeper was remembering the Clara I had raised. The little girl who used to sit on my lap while I signed contracts, who begged to join me on factory tours, who once whispered, "Dad, I want to be like you when I grow up." I thought she understood why I worked late nights, why I sacrificed vacations, why Margaret so often ate alone. I thought she would see the company not as a prison, but as a promise, the proof that all my choices were made for her future. But instead of gratitude, Clara gave me accusation. Instead of loyalty, she gave me betrayal. And instead of stepping into my shoes, she tried to take a knife to them. From my office window, the Seattle skyline looked different. Every glowing light I once viewed with pride now felt like a reminder of how fragile trust could be. I thought of the janitor who had been with us for 20 years, the engineer who turned down bigger salaries because Sterling Tech treated him like family, the single mother in HR who we gave flexible hours instead of cutting her loose. Clara called these sentimental inefficiencies. I called them humanity, and now my own daughter was ready to shred them for the sake of a sharper bottom line. Harold Whitman, my oldest friend and co-founder, leaned across the table after reviewing Clara's proposals. His voice was low, grim. "She's convincing them. Edward, they think she's the future. They think you're the past." I felt the words lodge in my chest like shrapnel. Clara hadn't just attacked my decisions, she had branded me irrelevant, a relic of a world she wanted to erase. I gripped the edge of my desk, feeling the weight of 30 years pressing down. Rage burned hot, grief colder still, until both coiled into something sharper. This was no longer about business metrics or modernization. This was about survival. My daughter had chosen greed over loyalty, profit over people, ambition over blood, and in doing so, she had forced my hand. I had wanted nothing more than to step aside gracefully one day, to watch Clara rise naturally into leadership. But now I realized I couldn't, not while she was willing to burn everything to the ground just to prove I was obsolete. I hadn't built Sterling Tech by surrendering, and I wasn't about to let my daughter become the executioner of everything I stood for. When I pulled into Clara's driveway that night, the rain was still tapping softly against the windshield, a rhythm that felt almost like a warning. I had made this drive countless times, yet it had never felt so heavy. Part of me wondered if I should turn back, if facing her across a dinner table while knowing she was sharpening legal knives against me would break something in me that could never be repaired. But another part of me needed to look her in the eye, to see the daughter I had raised and the woman who now stood against me. The door opened before I could even knock. Clara stood there, framed by the warm glow of the house, dressed in a cream sweater, her smile polished, her arms extended for a hug that felt scripted. "Dad." "Right on time," she said, her voice smooth, rehearsed. I let her embrace me, but there was no warmth in it. The scent of roasted chicken drifted from the kitchen, the same kind Margaret used to make, but here it smelled like camouflage, a mask covering the battlefield beneath. Daniel appeared in the foyer, sleeves rolled up, carrying silverware like props on a stage. His handshake was firm, maybe too firm, lingering a second longer than it should. "Edward, good to see you. Can I get you a glass of wine?" Something stronger. His tone was bright, too bright, like a man trying to cover a crack in the wall with a fresh coat of paint. Then came the only genuine moment of the evening. Emily ran into the room, her little overalls stained with paint, her laughter cutting through the tension like sunlight in a storm. "Grandpa," she shouted, leaping into my arms. I held her tightly, grateful for the innocence that hadn't yet been poisoned by ambition. She handed me a crayon drawing a big stick figure behind a desk, a smaller one spinning in a chair beside it, both under the Sterling Tech logo she had scribbled in clumsy red and blue. "It's us at your office," she said proudly. My throat tightened as I kissed her forehead. Across the room, Clara's eyes lingered on the drawing. For the briefest second, I thought I saw something flicker, guilt, regret. or maybe calculation before her mask returned. Dinner unfolded like a play with actors hitting their marks. Clara moved between stove and counter with practiced grace, her every movement efficient, controlled. Daniel filled silences with chatter about his new architectural project, speaking quickly, almost desperately. I sat with my wine glass, studying every detail, every pause, every glance. When Clara finally joined us at the table, her smile remained steady, but her words carried edges. "Dad, you look tired. Maybe you should rest more. Too much work can cloud judgment." The remark felt casual on the surface, but the knife underneath was sharp. I forced a smile. "Work keeps me sharp. Clara, how are things in the finance department?" Her spoon froze halfway to her mouth before she answered. "Let's not talk about work at dinner. Tonight is family time." The irony of her words stung. Family time, when she was dismantling ours piece by piece. Emily, blissfully unaware, climbed into her booster seat and began chattering about preschool. Then she looked at me with wide eyes and asked, "Grandpa, why are you sad?" The entire table froze. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I was just thinking about how much I love our family dinners." I could feel Clara's gaze across the table. Steady, unreadable. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw the little girl who used to wait at the window for me to come home. But the moment passed. The rest of the meal was a study in tension disguised as normalcy. Daniel poured more wine than anyone needed, his chatter bordering on nervous. Clara asked about my health, my sleep, my memory. Her questions dressed as concern but tasting of reconnaissance. Every bite of chicken, every sip of wine felt like evidence being gathered. After dessert, I stood to leave, thanking them with words that felt hollow. "As always, perfect," I said, though nothing about the evening was perfect. Clara walked me to the door, her expression soft but her eyes calculating. "Dad, are you sure you're okay? You seem different tonight." I studied her carefully, searching for sincerity. "I'm fine, Clara. Just reflecting on what sterling tech means to me, to us." For the first time that night, her smile faltered, just slightly, before she leaned in and kissed my cheek. "Drive safe. Roads are slick." As the door closed behind me, I stood in the drizzle, staring back through the window. Clara was already clearing dishes, her movements precise, efficient, methodical. The house glowed warm, but inside it was ice. Emily's drawing crinkled in my hand, fragile proof that innocence still existed in this family war. And in that moment, one truth hardened inside me. This wasn't family dinner. It was theater. And I was sitting across from my greatest enemy, dressed in the face of my daughter. I arrived at Pike Place Market 15 minutes early, choosing a small table by the window overlooking the stalls where vendors shouted prices for flowers and fish. The place was alive with noise and color, but inside me, everything was heavy and gray. I ordered a black coffee, no cream, no sugar. Bitterness seemed appropriate. My hands wrapped around the warm cup, as if it might steady me for what was coming. When Clara finally walked in at exactly 2:15, she was dressed not like a daughter meeting her father, but like an executive prepared for combat. Her charcoal suit looked like armor. Her heels struck the floor with precision, and her eyes scanned the room like a general calculating exits. She sat across from me with a professional smile that never reached her eyes. "Dad, thank you for coming." For a moment, we exchanged pleasantries. She asked about my drive, about the weather. I asked about Emily, about Daniel's work. It felt like two strangers rehearsing lines from a script neither of us believed. Finally, I leaned forward, unable to stomach the pretense. "Why didn't you come to me directly, Clara? Why file a lawsuit before even speaking to me?" Her eyes flickered, surprise or guilt. I couldn't tell, but her expression hardened quickly. "Because every time I tried, you were too busy. Too busy being the CEO. Too busy answering phone calls at the dinner table. Too busy being everything for everyone except my father." The words sliced through me sharper than any legal motion. She didn't stop. Her voice grew steadier, angrier, years of silence cracking open. Do you remember how many birthdays you left halfway through? How many vacations ended early because the company called? Do you remember Mom's last Christmas, when she begged you to stay home and you chose the office instead? You didn't build this company for me. You built it for yourself, for your ego. I gripped my cup tighter, the ceramic burning against my palms. That's not true. Everything I did for you, for your future. Every late night, every deal I fought for, every sacrifice I thought I was giving you security, opportunity, a foundation stronger than anything I ever had. She laughed then, but there was no joy in it, only bitterness. For me, do you think a child measures love in stock options and retirement plans? Do you think missing my graduation, missing family dinners, missing Mom's final months can be excused because Sterling Tech's quarterly reports look good? Her words dragged Margaret's ghost into the cafe, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I lowered my voice, fighting to stay calm. I provided. Clara, I gave you stability. That was my love, even if I failed to show it the way you wanted. Her eyes narrowed, sharp as glass. No, Dad, that wasn't love. That was obsession. And now you're so blinded by your obsession with loyalty and tradition that you can't see what's happening. Sterling Tech is falling behind. Competitors are innovating while we stagnate. You refuse automation, refuse AI, refuse progress. Loyalty doesn't pay dividends. Sentiment doesn't save jobs. Profit does. I leaned closer across the table, my voice quiet but unshakable. Profit built on broken families, discarded employees, and soulless machines is not progress, it's destruction. Loyalty is why this company survived for 30 years. Loyalty is why people stayed when others offered them more. Loyalty is why Sterling Tech is more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. I will not let you turn it into another corporation that eats its own to chase short-term gains. Outside, the crowd buzzed. Vendors called out. Life carried on as if nothing was happening. But for me, time slowed, narrowed to the battle across this table. Clara's jaw tightened, her hand curled around her phone like it was a weapon. Then you'll lose everything. Dad. Because the world doesn't care about loyalty anymore. The world cares about results. And I'm willing to deliver them, even if it means saving the company from you. I stared into her eyes, and for a fleeting second, I saw Margaret there, her mother's eyes, filled not with warmth, but with ice. And maybe that's why the world is broken. Clara, but I will not break with it. Not for you. Not for anyone. She stood abruptly, gathering her purse. I don't need your approval. I don't need your permission. And I don't need your company, but I will take it. Her heels clicked like gunshots against the hardwood as she walked away, disappearing into the market crowd. I sat alone, staring at the cold coffee in front of me. Outside, strangers passed one another, lives crossing for moments before parting forever. And I realized something more painful than betrayal itself. My daughter wasn't just trying to steal my company. She was trying to erase the father she never believed I was. The morning of the hearing felt heavier than any day of my life. The courthouse loomed gray against the Seattle sky, rain sliding down its stone face like tears that I refused to shed. Cameras flashed as I climbed the steps, reporters shouting my name, their voices blending into a blur. I straightened my tie, gripped my briefcase, and reminded myself I wasn't just fighting for a company. I was fighting for my name, my sanity, my life. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Shareholders filled the gallery, their eyes calculating, waiting to see who would emerge as the future of Sterling Tech. Journalists hunched over notebooks, hungry for scandal. On the opposite side, Clara sat with her attorney, Victoria Hale, both of them exuding confidence. Clara wore navy blue, polished, the picture of the competent daughter saving her family legacy. She didn't look at me, not once. Judge Matthews entered, silver hair gleaming under the lights, his reputation for no-nonsense justice filling the room. "This court is now in session," he announced, and the battle began. Victoria Hale rose first, her voice a blend of honey and poison. "Your Honor, this case is not about greed, nor is it about malice. It is about protection. Protection of Sterling Tech, of its shareholders, and of the legacy Edward Sterling built. Sadly, that very legacy is now at risk, not from external forces, but from within. Mr. Sterling has become emotionally unstable since the passing of his wife, Margaret. His judgment is clouded, his decisions erratic. Today we will show you the shocking truth: Sterling Tech is in danger because its leader has lost control." Her words slithered across the room. Screens lit up with evidence. She presented transcripts from board meetings where my voice had risen, financial reports where donations to Margaret's foundation were marked as unprofitable expenses, memos describing my opposition to automation. "These are not the decisions of a rational CEO," she told the jury. "They are the actions of a grieving man incapable of moving forward." Then Clara took the stand. My daughter, sworn in, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She looked the jury straight in the eyes as she dismantled me piece by piece. "My father is guided by emotion, not logic. He refuses to modernize. He rejects automation and AI. He prioritizes loyalty over profitability. Sterling Tech is stagnating because he cannot adapt." Her voice was calm, deliberate, devastating. At one point she spoke of Margaret's foundation. "It drains $200,000 annually with no measurable return." When I suggested reallocating the funds, he became agitated and irrational. Hearing my wife's memory reduced to a line item on a balance sheet nearly broke me, but I sat still, my jaw tight, every muscle in my body trembling with restraint. The gallery whispered, reporters scribbled, even some shareholders nodded, persuaded by the picture of a daughter reluctantly saving her father's company. For a moment, I could feel the tide turning against me. It seemed as though betrayal had triumphed. Then Jonathan Pierce stood, my lawyer, my friend, his voice steady and sharp. "Your Honor, while the plaintiff paints a picture of decline, we must also examine the plaintiff's own actions. During discovery, we uncovered 3 unauthorized financial transfers made by Clara Sterling Morgan. The total amount, $847,000. These funds were moved without board approval, redirected to finance this very lawsuit against her father." Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Victoria shot to her feet. Objection, irrelevant, and prejudicial. Judge Matthews raised his hand, his tone firm. Overruled. Continue. Jonathan projected the bank statements on the screen. Dates, amounts, accounts. This is not speculation. This is embezzlement. Money stolen from Sterling Tech to fund a hostile takeover. If Mr. Sterling is guilty of sentiment, then what is Ms. Morgan guilty of? Clara's composure cracked. Her face drained of color, her lips pressed tight as whispers swelled through the gallery. But Jonathan wasn't finished. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence regarding Ms. Hale. 2 years ago, she was sanctioned by the Bar Association for suborning perjury in a similar case, temporarily suspended from practice. And now, once again, witness coaching is evident. We have recordings of Ms. Hale rehearsing testimony with her client." The room exploded. Reporters nearly leapt from their seats. Shareholders turned to each other, eyes wide with disbelief. Victoria stammered. Her calm mask shattered. "That is outrageous," Judge Matthews leaned forward, his expression grave. "This court takes such allegations seriously. The recordings will be reviewed immediately." The balance shifted. Just minutes earlier, Clara had been the savior, the competent daughter protecting her father's empire. Now she looked small, cornered, exposed. She kept her eyes on the table, unable to face the jury, unable to face me. Jonathan delivered the final blow. "Your Honor, this trial is not about an incompetent father. It is about a daughter willing to sacrifice family, integrity, and truth for power. We asked the court to recognize the real betrayal here. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. The weight of it pressed into my chest until I could barely breathe. For weeks, I had been painted as the man losing control, the patriarch slipping into decline. But in that moment, the truth stood clear. It wasn't me who had lost my way. It was Clara. When Judge Matthews finally delivered his ruling, I should have felt triumphant. After weeks of battle, after endless hours of preparation, after the most humiliating accusations a father could endure, the court dismissed Clara's petition. Mr. Sterling retains full control of Sterling Tech. The plaintiff's conduct raises serious concerns regarding financial impropriety and ethical violations. Case dismissed. The words echoed in the courtroom like a verdict of salvation. Around me, shareholders shifted, reporters scribbled. Jonathan placed a firm hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You've won." But as I looked across the aisle at my daughter, I realized victory had never felt emptier. Clara sat motionless, her shoulders sagging, her eyes fixed on the floor. The woman who had walked into this courtroom armored in confidence now looked small, defeated, and broken. For a fleeting moment, she reminded me of the little girl who once clung to my hand on her first day of school, and in that moment, the triumph I should have felt curdled into grief. We left the courtroom under the watchful eyes of cameras. Shareholders congratulated me. Some of the very same who had doubted me only weeks before. James Corbin, opportunistic as ever, clasped my hand and said, "Full confidence in your leadership, Mr. Sterling." I smiled politely, but inside I wanted to laugh. Just yesterday, he was prepared to crown Clara as the savior of Sterling Tech. Now, with the tide turned, he pledged loyalty to me. Loyalty is fickle when it's bought with dividends. In the car, Jonathan Pierce tried to remind me of the scale of the victory. "You've not only protected your company, you've proven your competence beyond question. You've reestablished authority." I nodded, but his words slid off me like rain on glass. I hadn't fought this battle for authority. I had fought because my daughter had forced me to, and winning against her didn't feel like winning at all. That night, I returned to my house on Capitol Hill, the walls heavy with silence. I walked through rooms lined with photographs of Margaret, of Clara as a child, of family moments long buried under decades of ambition. I poured myself a glass of scotch and sat in my study, the glow of the city stretching beyond the window. The empire I built was safe, but the family I built it for was in ruins. The next morning, the headlines broke. Sterling Tech CEO vindicated. Daughter accused of embezzlement. Reporters swarmed Clara's home, snapping photographs as she shielded Emily from the flashes. The same public that had praised her as a visionary now devoured her as a fraud. I watched the coverage on television, my chest tightening as I saw her face pale, her eyes haunted. I had destroyed her, not with anger, not with words, but with truth. And truth can be the cruelest weapon of all. For days afterward, the phone calls poured in, shareholders relieved, employees reassured, friends congratulating me on my resilience. But when the house fell silent again, I was left only with the echo of Clara's voice in the courtroom. "You weren't the father I needed." Those words replayed in my mind more than the judge's ruling ever did. In private moments, I asked myself whether Margaret had foreseen this. She had warned me long ago. She needs your attention more than the company does. I thought I had time to fix it, to explain, to show Clara the depth of my love through the stability I worked so hard to build. But now I saw the bitter truth. All she had wanted was a father, not a benefactor, and I had failed to give her that. I still remember the look on her face as she left the courthouse, Daniel guiding her by the elbow, Emily clutching her mother's hand. Clara glanced at me once, her eyes glassy with something between anger and sorrow. There were no words exchanged, just a silence heavy enough to drown me. That silence followed me home, followed me into every meeting, every phone call, every quiet hour of the night. On paper, I had everything. Sterling Tech was secure. My reputation had been vindicated, my leadership reaffirmed, but the cost was incalculable. I had defended my empire, but I had lost my daughter. Even now, weeks after the trial, I walk into the boardroom and see her shadow. Every chair reminds me of her ambition, every chart of her vision, every silence of her absence. People congratulate me, but I see the pity in their eyes. They know the truth: you can win the courtroom and still lose the family. And so I ask myself, was it worth it to prove I was competent, to prove I was strong, to preserve what I had built? Some nights, I think yes. Other nights, I wonder if I've simply proven Clara right, that I always valued the company over the people I loved. As I sit here tonight, Emily's crayon drawing pinned above my desk, I realize the fight is not over. The court battle is finished, but the war inside my family still rages, and the victory that felt so hollow in that courtroom remains heavy in my chest. Because in winning, I lost the very person I built it all for. 10 days after the verdict, I found myself sitting on a weathered bench by Lake Union. The water shimmered under the late afternoon sun, sailboats drifting lazily across its surface, the Seattle skyline stretching like a promise beyond the trees. I had arrived early, as I always did, needing the silence to prepare for what I knew could be the most important conversation of my life. I had won the courtroom battle, but victory felt hollow, jagged, unfinished. This wasn't over, not until I faced Clara again. Not as CEO and rival, but as father and daughter. I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, there she was, Clara. Not in a suit, not armored with power, just jeans, a sweater, and eyes that looked older than her years. She sat down beside me, leaving careful distance, the kind that spoke of wounds still raw. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just watched the water move. Then she spoke, her voice quiet, fragile. "Dad, I've been thinking about what you said in court." I turned to her, studying her face. The fire was still there, but beneath it I saw something I hadn't allowed myself to see in years: pain. She swallowed hard. "I never felt like you were proud of me. Every time I succeeded, it felt invisible. Every time I tried to reach you, the company came first. I wanted you to see me, Dad, not just as an heir, not as a manager, but as your daughter." Her words landed heavier than any verdict. I felt something inside me crack open, years of denial crumbling. "Clara, I thought I was showing my love. Every late night, every deal closed, every sacrifice, I thought I was securing your future. But I confused providing with parenting. I thought success was love, when what you needed was me." She looked at me, eyes wet. "Mom tried to tell you. She said you loved the company more than us." I lowered my head, shame rising. She was right. I didn't love the company more, but I didn't know how to show it. And in the end, I failed you both. For a long moment, silence stretched between us. Then Clara whispered, "When I filed that lawsuit, I wasn't just trying to take Sterling Tech. I was trying to prove I mattered, that I could make choices, that I wasn't just the child waiting by the window." I turned fully toward her. "You've always mattered. I just didn't show it. And maybe you were right about some things. Maybe the company does need modernization. Maybe I was holding on too tightly." Her brows furrowed, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Are you saying you'd trust me with the company? After everything?" I nodded slowly. "Not just trust you, work with you. What if we shared it? Partnership, co-CEOs, your innovation and my experience, side by side, not war, balance." She inhaled sharply, her lips parting as if she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. She stood, pacing toward the water's edge, staring at the ripples. For the first time in months, she looked uncertain. Finally, she turned back, her voice trembling. "Equal authority, real partnership. No hidden strings. Equal authority," I said firmly. "Full transparency. I want Sterling Tech to be our company. I don't want to destroy you. Clara, I want to build with you." Tears welled in her eyes, though she tried to blink them away. "I wanted power. But what I really wanted was recognition. To know I wasn't just a shadow in your empire. I rose, closing the distance between us. You were never a shadow. You are my daughter. Brilliant, ambitious, capable. You're everything I hoped for and more. Her composure broke. For the first time since Margaret's funeral, I saw Clara cry openly. She stepped into my arms, her voice muffled against my chest. I'm sorry, Dad. I held her tightly, my own voice breaking. So am I. But maybe this doesn't have to be the end of our story. Maybe it's a new beginning. We stood like that, father and daughter, not CEO and heir, not rivals in a courtroom, just two broken people trying to find a way forward. When she pulled back, her eyes carried something I hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. Co-CEOs, she whispered, as if testing the words. I smiled. Partners, not enemies. She gave a shaky laugh, wiping her tears. Mom would have loved this. I looked out at Lake Union, the sun sinking lower, painting the water in gold. For the first time in years, I felt the weight on my chest lift. I hadn't just saved Sterling Tech. I had saved something far more fragile, far more important. Because in the end, legacy isn't about companies or profits, it's about family. And for the first time in decades, I had a chance to get mine back. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and roasted chicken, just like Margaret used to make. This time, the warmth felt different, not as a mask, but as something real. Clara moved between stove and counter with a quiet energy that no longer felt rehearsed. Daniel set the table with care, and Emily came running in, her laughter ringing through the room. She held up a crayon drawing, her smile wide and unguarded. Look, Grandpa, it's you and Mommy at Sterling Tech. You're both at the big desks. You're a team now. I took the drawing in my hands, the stick figures, simple but powerful. One labeled Grandpa, one labeled Mommy, side by side, not fighting, but working together. For weeks, I had seen betrayal, lies, and bitterness. But in Emily's innocent lines, I saw something I thought I had lost forever: hope. We sat down together, me, Clara, Daniel, and Emily, and for the first time in months, the dinner table didn't feel like a battlefield. Emily told stories about preschool, Daniel spoke about his new project, and Clara shared cautious but genuine ideas for the company. And I listened not as a CEO guarding his throne, but as a father finally learning to hear his daughter. As I raised my glass, I looked at Clara, then at Emily, and I realized something. Family betrayal can break you, but redemption can rebuild stronger bonds. What had started as war ended as something far greater: partnership, forgiveness, and the chance to rebuild what truly mattered. And that's where the story leaves you, not with profit margins or courtroom victories, but with a reminder that no legacy is worth more than the people we love. Because in the end, redemption isn't about erasing the past, it's about choosing to write a better future. If this story resonated with you, take a moment right now, tell me in the comments what family means to you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in boardrooms or courts, but at the dinner table, in the silence between parent and child. And by being here, you're part of that conversation too. So let me leave you with this: forgiveness may not erase betrayal, but it can turn enemies back into family.